Full disclaimer for this week's Year of the Mecha. I have not watched Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn, and frankly, I don't give enough of a shit to do so. So don't ask me about like what's happening today, because we're playing Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn for the PS3.
Yeah, I'm as in the dark as you. I know that some of the mechs are incredibly pretty. I know that the animation is very pretty.
Yep.
I know that it brings back a couple of characters from the original series that no one particularly was invested in.
I know one of the characters is named Full Frontal, continuing the long tradition of Gundam names being the stupidest fucking thing ever.
I mean, at least Jim Gingham made me laugh. Full Frontal is just like, no, seriously, what are we doing now?
Yeah, it's like you yeah, you want to look at that definition again for what you just said.
Gym, like no, not even like GYM, as in gymnasium.
Yeah.
Gingham, that's Little House in the Prairie shit. They wore that.
Well, I was thinking more in the context of like calling the Char clone of this series Full Frontal. Is like you do realize where that comes from.
I'm gonna guess
Assault, right? No. Well, yes, technically maybe that as well, but both could be like, I mean, like the Venn diagram between those contexts is probably close to a circle.
Yeah. Someone explained a term to him that he thought sounded really cool, and he misunderstood it in the most hilarious way possible.
Yeah. Hi, Cyborg. Hi, Millennium. You arrived at like quite a discussion.
Yes, we're talking about going full frontal.
Yeah.
In Gingham.
Yep. Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. A game by From Software. So here's going back to a bit more of like that bit of history and context that I like to delve in a lot with when it comes to the games I have been demonstrating on this stream series. Back in September, kind of extending even to the middle of August, you might remember I played a series of PlayStation 2 games by From Software called Another Century's Episode.
Yes.
A style of game that I can best describe as taking the core concept of the Zone of the Enders series, but making it actually work. You know? Giving the gameplay systems the much needed depth to stand up against like the contemporaries and standards of like the genre itself. But following those three PS2 games, dark times happened in which there was another Centuries Episode game for the PS3, Another Centuries Episode R, that was really bad. It did not play at all like how the series was supposed to. You can basically lay a lot of the blame at the producer of the Super Robot Wars series because those were his ideas.
Yeah,
and
Super Robot Wars at the time was going through a bit of a renaissance, so I can imagine his attentions were split.
Not to mention clout, I would say, considering Ace had always been like the real-time Super Robot Wars equivalent, so there was probably the incentive to probably think, we should maybe unify some of these elements a bit more, make the game more super.
Yeah,
but
we have the ability to actually say what we want to do rather than have most of it dictated to us. Always a good idea.
Yeah. So naturally, it didn't work out, and you could very much tell that I think, especially after the fact, no one at FromSoft themselves were particularly happy with it, because a year later they put out a PSP game called Another Centuries Episode Portable, which had the original gameplay system of the PS2 games, but it was a PSP game, and by the time it came out, ArtThink had already established themselves as the go-to developers for making really competent and robust mecha games that work within the confines of a PSP control scheme. And Ace Portable didn't achieve quite to the same degree. It's like the PS2 games, but more clunky, which was unfortunate. And now we're here a year later after that with Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn, in what is basically the last hurrah for that original mecha gameplay style that they had made work so well back on the PS2. They took the fundamentals of that system and what they had and decided, fuck it, let's just tune it towards one series rather than making it an all-encompassing series like system for multiple mecha series. And this is what you get.
End of an era kind of stuff.
It very much feels that way, especially when, you know, I would definitely describe that, like, From Software's mecha output during the PS3 generation was, like, pretty shoddy across the board until it got to the end of that console generation. You know, like, basically, like, 5th gen Armored Core and this were, like, the bright spots. I mean, I guess technically Chrome Hounds, but I can't really speak to how I would feel about that necessarily, because I never played the game when it was alive. And I especially can't now, since the servers for that game are dead, and you can't really play it the way it was supposed to anymore.
Yeah, the impression that I got was, if you could play it multiplayer, it was an absolutely phenomenal game. But
Yes.
the single-player campaign, as is common with these kind of games, just really felt like more of a training mode.
It 100%, yes. But this is a really fascinating game. You know, it's obviously the sort of thing where you can tell where the constraints still ultimately, like, reared their ugly heads on this. The fact that this isn't just a game that's based on Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. This is based on Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn before it was even finished, because it was an OVA series. The episodes came out on their own schedule. They didn't have to worry about the pressures of, like, making sure they were coming out once a week on network television. So by this point, I believe you only had, like, I think the first 3 episodes to basically pull material from. But this game, like, after release, ended up getting a lot of DLC content, which kind of expanded some of the material a bit further. Obviously, kind of pulling from what other episodes might have possibly released after this game had come out.
Yeah.
You know, this was in 2012, again, for context.
Because I vaguely remember it was doing the Hellsing Ultimate release schedule of episodes are done when they're ready.
Mm-hmm. Giant Robo as well, when you really get down to it. Even though it's funny because Giant Robo, like, they had a plan for the expected time frame. They thought they would get it done, but it ended up going for so much longer. It finished in 98. That like, they cared about making sure it was perfect.
Yeah. Like, it works wonderfully once everything is done, because every episode winds up getting the attention and the quality that it requires. But you wind up having to wait like 3 years for an episode to come out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's it can be quite a nightmare.
Yep.
Having to wait for it. So I'm going to start things first by going into one of the training missions. There's like 6 training missions overall, because there is a lot of nuance to this game's controls and mechanics, and how they just make things so much deeper than they were even in the original Another Century's episode games. Loaded up with the titular Unicorn Gundam. And, you know, some of this will seem very familiar. B Magnum needs its own tutorial, you think, but there are other things that require a lot more attention as far as, like, how this game plays. But I guess one thing I'll get out of the way as far as how this game is played: this is entirely space battle focused, but it highlights an important thing that I find lacking to 100% selling the fact that this is in space. You don't, like in the PS2 Another Century's episode games, if you tilted your camera up and down, it would also tilt, like, the y-axis pitch of your mecha. So you could potentially flip over 180 degrees and fly around upside down because there's no gravity. You know, like what is your center point? It's all relevant, relative. But I guess they couldn't figure out how to program that on the PS3, so it's you don't get that unrestricted y-axis movement. But they do a lot of camera tricks to try and make up for that, you know, like heavy tilting and banking of the camera to make the circle strafing feel more 3-dimensional than it is. Yeah. Like look at that subtle tilt increase.
That is actually very impressive.
Yeah. I also would not be surprised if maybe they could have figured out how to do the unrestricted Y-axis movement, but maybe as a means to reduce potential motion sickness in players, they decided this was probably a better solution instead. You know, just to give some sort of consistent point to focus on.
And also, as we've said before, when you get down to it, the PS3 was just a real pain in the ass to program for. So anything that could have potentially cut down massive amounts of troubleshooting and problem solving, they probably just went, well, is it really that important to be able to fly upside down?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely feels at this point that it likely would have been a design reason. But it's a cool detail regardless. I mean, there's not many mecha games out there that you can point to that really, like, that really highlight just the cool factor of fighting in space. In fact, like, if you make a complex... I believe that if you make a worthwhile, complex, and in-depth mecha gameplay system that works well on the ground, there is no greater flex than going, let's take that and put it in space. And it still works.
Let's give you 360 degrees of movement and set it so that everything isn't on a standard XY axis.
Yeah.
Like, I can think of maybe like 3 games that have built that up.
Yeah, like Heavy Gear 2 is the big one for me. You know? That game did not need to have zero-G combat. In fact, there's only, I think, 3 missions in the campaign where that's a thing. But they still did it anyway because they could, and I respect it. Outside of that, though, the rest of the core controls are very familiar to anyone who's played another Centuries episode. You press X button to toggle on your dash. You have like a fancy like quick turn ability you can do if you double tap while holding a direction, like that. And then R1 and R2 are your controls for ascending and descending, you know? Because gravity is a concept in this game that is politely told to fuck off.
We understand it. We accept it. We don't want it anywhere near us.
Yeah. You can double tap R1 or R2 to do those quick dashes vertically. And as for horizontal dashes, this is a new type only zone. Space. Earth noise forbidden. Get lost. Yeah. But also with the with like horizontal lateral dashes, if you want to do those, you know, you just tap the left stick in a direction, and that's how you get that. Just like in the original Ace games. And then you have dedicated buttons for ranged weapons and melee. You even have shift mode, where you hold L1 and it replaces all the functions of your face buttons with sub-weapons that you otherwise couldn't fit, like on the default controls.
Yeah,
I always...
That was, like, it was the PS3 era when people started experimenting with that, and for a while it felt like it was in every single game.
Yeah, and honestly, like, considering that Ace was born out of, like, being, like, a game inspired by, like, the free-flying nature of Zone of the Enders, Zone of the Enders would have definitely benefited from having, like, this kind of shift mode, because it was very clunky having to cycle through all those sub-weapons with the D-pad.
Especially in the second game where you had like 30.
Yeah, like a full dozen. It was a pain in the ass to do really cool stuff with all of them in like almost like a combo sequence.
Yeah.
So this is a lock-on based game, naturally, as you would expect, but there's with this being a Gundam-focused version of this gameplay style, there's more nuance to how it works. You can see like that sort of squarish crosshair around that has turned purple. That's basically like your best indicator of like what your accuracy is going to be on the next shot when you fire. And like it turns purple when you go into what is basically your mobile suit's optimal firing range.
Right.
It doesn't really result in like an absurd boost in damage, but like it definitely guarantees, especially on non-rapid fire weapons, like the chance of getting a stun. Yeah. So it's good to get it when you can, but with how fast fights in this game will ultimately go, you're gonna be wasting too much time trying to fish for this type of scenario.
I take it that the ammo you get is finite.
Yes. Unlike in Ace R, where it just goes into a reload cooldown, you run out of ammo, that's it, unless you specifically pick up targets that are marked supply.
Right. The glowing cutaways whenever you cut something in half.
Yep. Melee combat's also expanded quite a bit from how it was in the PS2 games, where it felt a bit more Dynasty Warriors-like, you know, very dial-a-combo, where it's just light attack strings that are followed by a heavy attack to end it. But then you have things like, well, this was technically an Ace 3 that you could do, where you could press the boost button coming out of a melee combo that it would basically put you back on the move again. You know? It's a very great move. It's one of the reasons that I love playing Another Century's Episode 3 the most. But then you have things where, like, you get different varying levels of attack strength based on, like, if you hold the button, you know? So you have, like, that's just like a regular, like, heavy attack if you hold the button. But if you do a combo and then hold the button, it acts as like a proper ender that is its own animation.
A fancy little cinematic at times as well.
Oh yeah, there's camera work in this game. You know, it might look like it's a bit of a mess, like it's struggling to keep up, but it just adds to the dynamic nature of how cool battles can look. You even get special. Yeah, you even get special melee attacks if you combine them with your ascend and descend buttons. Yeah, which, Zone of the Enders 2 actually kind of had that as well, but it was more of a combo ender. Like, if you were doing a melee combo and you pressed either the button to ascend or descend, you would launch your opponent upward or downward, which could be beneficial if there was, like, you know, environmental hazards in those directions.
Yeah.
But yeah, camera work, I would definitely say, as far as showing the dynamicism of mecha combat, is at least a step up from how it was portrayed in the PS2 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, like, even more outside of that, where there's, like, you know, there are things that, oh yeah, there's also the other thing where, oh, hold on, is it gonna, oh, let's, yeah, and then there's, like, a special stab animation that only happens when you see, like, enemies in that specified, like, stun animation, where you saw them kind of reeling backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you can also adjust, like, the firing mode and strength of all your weapons with the D-pad. You couldn't do this. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's the high-powered version of the beam rifle. It's just a continuous beam that deals multiple hits. You know? Really easy for someone to avoid, but, like, if you get them locked down, oh boy, it's damaging.
You stun them and you just finish them off in one go.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, you have, because mobile suits are often equipped with shields, it makes sense that you have to have a guard function. Ace didn't really have this. It was more of like on a per unit basis, that you had to press a separate button that was assigned to the shift menu. Here, you just hold L2 and you'll always block. And your shield, you know, there's a meter for it, as you can see with all the meters on the bottom left. It has its own durability. Everything's kind of a resource in this, in an effort to more realistically show what, like, mobile suit combat in this universe would actually be like.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
the Gundam games in general have a weird kind of relationship with realism.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also the other thing that, like I was mentioning about, like, the left stick dashes, but, like, there's also the fact that you can modify, like, those directional dashes even further if you hold L1. Like, your lateral dashes end up going for a lot farther. And in fact, even when you're locked on, if you dash forward, you get that very cinematic, like, dash forward that'll, like, adjust, like, to the angle of where your enemy is. And it also, you know, can affect your vertical dashes as well. So, like this is what I love. As complex as it sounds, it's like they genuinely thought of, like, how, someone at FromSoft had to basically have taken a challenge of like, I can make 2 different control schemes and combine them into one and have it work.
Because the lighting's really impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we'll even show off like this next one that I think it can take more time to really appreciate, like just the dash systems that are in place with this game. Mm-hmm. It does highlight, though, an important thing where, oh yeah, and we even get like a different unit as well, which highlights even more sub-weapons as well as eye fields. You know, eye fields, it's a familiar concept. And like most advanced things in this game, it also ties into the fact that holding L1 changes almost every property about all the other buttons when you press them. So, you know, you can still do things like funnels. You have binder and blast cannons. Just overwhelming firepower. The works. But if you press L2, the button you use to guard, while holding L1, you activate an eye field, which, you know, is a brief period of invulnerability, you know, because it creates a force field. Yeah, it's like a Zaku Queller Quibelli, but obviously I think like I think I might actually, like it's a different name, I think, for like this particular unit, because there's one that looks similar to this, but it's red colored because it's piloted by the Unicorn's version of Char. But here's that supercharged forward dash I was talking about. And like when you dash forward with it, you can modify it further by tapping left or right to do a barrel roll. So you got plenty of options as far as how you want to make your approach, you know?
This game, like, I mean, we've been doing this for like, what, 20 minutes, and like the controls alone are ridiculously in-depth.
Yeah. Like, it's the sort of thing where it almost feels like it has to be kind of a waste that it is specifically being used for, like, a tie-in to an ongoing, at the time anyway, an ongoing anime series. When it's like, this, like, if this had gotten just, like, the side story treatment where they got to make their own original story the same way that, like, Beck and BB Studio basically got to do multiple times with other Gundam games, like, this would have been killer.
Yeah. Imagine Sunrise were wanting to keep a much tighter grip on it because it was still ongoing at the time.
Yeah, that, and also, you know, Beck / BB Studio, as they later were, you know, they are owned by Bandai. FromSoft isn't owned under them, so I guess that's also that other factor as well. They feel like they're allowing to give a bit more freedom to where they see fit to studios that are directly under their control.
Yeah, they could probably go, okay, well, we've got a question about this. What would happen in this scenario? They'd be able to get an answer back in a day or two.
Yeah. Another detail about all these different melee combos and stuff that is important to note is that if you land specific melee moves, such as the dash through, and it's the finishing blow, you will guarantee a supply drop from the mobile suit that you just destroyed, which is very important to do if you're in missions where you're running low on like fuel levels and health and ammo, and you need to top off every time. Because that's the other thing. Most other mecha games, when you think about them, Gundam included, they operate on like a boost meter system. You know, it's like either it's like it depletes or it, you know, it overheats from overusing the verniers. But in here, like out in space, you have a fuel level that you see, like, that depletes slowly over time.
Does it act essentially like a time limit for each mission, or if you're constantly dashing all over the place, it's draining more rapidly?
It's the latter. I used to think that it kind of acted as like something of a time system. Like like the expectation was that you needed to wrap up whatever encounter you're in before it empties, but I've done a couple of the missions, most notably DLC missions, where it really strains your fuel levels. And as it turns out, if it depletes fully, you might have noticed that like that fuel meter had like a yellow section near the end of the 3/4 circle. If you wait a few minutes, it'll refill. But during the time when fuel is empty, you could still move around. It's just dash functions. Functions that would require the use of fuel just cannot be used. So it's
so you're limited, but you're not fully screwed, essentially.
Yeah, it's more of a penalty state, which I get. Obvious, it's one of those things where I get the reason why they did it that way. But at the same time, knowing how other games do things, I genuinely sometimes question why not just go with the traditional method. Because Ace did that, and it was very much the sort of thing where, you could run out your boost meter even faster in that than you can your fuel meter with most suits in this game. So it just kind of, I don't know. It's like a thing they do to try and make it different, but it almost feels superfluous when looking at the alternatives.
Yeah, just like an unsteady middle ground that doesn't really appeal to anyone.
Yeah,
like,
it's all. Yeah. So what up, Null Vortex? Yeah, it looks like we got someone in here that recognizes this game.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine there's definitely more people out there that have a lot of familiarity with the OVA itself. We don't. All I really have to go off on is the names of certain characters, the visuals, and the fact that, depending on who you ask, they either really love it or they really fucking hate it.
Yeah, Unicorn was the darling of the series for at least a good 8 or 9 years. It was showing up everywhere. All the merchandise was focused towards it.
There's an entire statue for it in fucking Japan somewhere.
Yep. Countless model kits just of the various forms of the titular Gundam. Apparently there's an anime for it. Who knew?
Yeah. And the big deal about the anime overall is the fact that after years upon years of alternate universe continuities for Gundam series, going from G Gundam, Wing, Seed, 00, all this stuff, this was, I guess, being billed as the sort of big hurrah for Universal Century fans, where it's guess what, guys? We're finally going back to it after the early 90s.
Yeah, and
it's still alive.
And we're going back to it with a big budget series. You're just going to have to wait 14 years for it to be finished.
Yeah. I know this has a physical copy, but is this available on Japanese PSN? I don't know. I know there's been a lot of DLC for it, though. Because that's another thing. You might have seen the little icons for DLC that show up occasionally when I've been hovering over the mission icons. But because there's a lot of DLC, both free and non-free. And I had to go through some, let's just say, effort to get what I believe is the full breadth of the DLC content that this game ultimately received. Over, the year and a half I think this game was ultimately supported.
Yeah, to be honest, I would be surprised if this was still available. Licensed games are... Yeah. It's arbitrary as to how long they're going to be up for.
Yeah.
So
at the very least...
Fantastic.
Yeah. At the very least, this is on PS3, and you can only get it on PS3.
Yep. Gotta love that lack of backwards compatibility between generations, huh?
Yeah. Maybe Kutaragi was right. Maybe we should have been grateful that he sold his console for $600. No, scratch that. For $599 US.
$599 US dollars. $599 US dollars.
You gotta get the quote right.
Clearly, we didn't appreciate the PS3 enough, so now we all must suffer.
Yeah, it's it's your damn fault you didn't see the value in using the PS3 as a computer to connect to your printer.
Hell, I bought mine the day that the PS4 came out, so everyone was trading in their PS3s, and it meant that I had my pick of the litter, and the prices were ridiculously cheap as well. I was like, I think I'm going to go for a 320 gig one, the maximum size that was available. I'm going to wind up getting it for about 30% cheaper than it should have been.
Yeah. I still wish I could have a fat original PS3 that wasn't always on the verge of death. because I had bad luck getting like across like 2 launch model PS3s that I basically settled on, just going, fuck it, I'll just get a slim PS3 because those are more reliable, and I can at least get a model of that still is like compatible with soft mods,
Yeah. I was able
which
to
is good.
I was actually able to get a fat PS3 a year or 2 ago, but unfortunately it wasn't a launch model.
Ah.
I've got it as a backup just in case.
Yeah.
So many more. Even though it isn't a launch one, so it doesn't have PS2 compatibility, it still has a lot of the bells and whistles that the later models didn't have.
Yeah. It's got that distinct Spider-Man font.
Yep.
The logo.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see playing through the story that like they still have like all these in-game cutscenes and whatnot. But there's also like just parts of like the story mode that you can select that don't have any gameplay. Like there are those yellow film strip looking icons where the whole idea is that it's basically slideshows of stills from the anime itself, just kind of giving summaries and like monologues of what's happening.
Yeah, I assume there's like many more missions than you can see, because I noticed the timeline at the top. But
yes.
A lot of them looked like it was like 5 cutscenes for every one mission.
Yeah. And like a lot of the DLC downloads as well are still the same thing, which is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
PS3s are still have value because of this. It's unfortunate many peeps are quick to sell them. Yeah. Like, not just PS3s, but like just a whole lot of like old consoles in general.
Yeah, I never sell a console if I can avoid it.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go straight into playing as the Unicorn Gundam when it's like in its fully activated mode. After seeing the money shots, the thing that convinced people that this was cool.
Expand Gundam.
Yep. That said, though, we are very limited on weapons. We only got like the head Vulcan cannons, as well as Saikamu Jack, which we can't activate unless the game basically tells us that, hey, there's some fin funnels active. There's stuff that is like requiring psychic waves in order to control it. Maybe you should interfere, because if you use Saikamu Jack, you basically hijack all of their fin funnels and turn them against them. It's fucking rad.
Almost like chaff in a way.
Yeah, but it's like if you're able to like turn chaff against you, against your enemies. Oh yeah, you got beam clashes as well.
Oh, that's the good stuff.
Oh shit, my battery's low.
The battle's so intense, it's actually taken out of your controller.
Yeah. Yeah.
LED mode. Oh, I swear to God, there's a part of me that thinks that they only made Gundam Unicorn simply because someone fat-fingered an order and bought like 5 million LEDs.
Yeah, or someone decided to do it like on a dare, like not even for like a Gunpla model, but like one of those super expensive like just like metal diecast toys or some shit, where they were like, fuck it, how about we just make like a high quality diecast Gundam with LEDs to light up certain things, like the eyes or whatever. And then someone went, that's weak shit. I bet I could make a Gundam that is half LEDs. And he's like, you're on.
Plastic light piping is for the weak. We're going to be able to see this shit from orbit.
Yeah. That said, though, as you can see with this fight and the fact that we are limited to, like this powered up mode we're in technically does have a time limit, but it's infinite for this mission. We only have the head Vulcans and Saikamu Jack. But, and because of that, this ends up highlighting, one of the things that makes the main campaign, Unicorn mode as it's called, not as interesting. Like, it's not what makes the entire game as it is worthwhile to me in the end. Like, if you just take that mode by itself, because it's ultimately committing to the sin that I've described with, like, why some Gundam games are typically, like, not good, because they try to focus too much on the idea of being like, it's based on this series, so naturally we should try and recreate as much of that original series as possible, like all the scenarios and battles that took place. Even though a lot of the ways the way those are scripted and paced out or whatever are kind of antithetical to like what you're able to accomplish generally with a really good mecha gameplay system. You know, that's why the side story games for Gundam is, you know, why it works. Because it's not about playing as Amuro and going through all the same motions he went through. You're playing as someone else who's going through his own slice of hell during the 1 Year War. And you could just make that whatever you want and have it function as a game.
I mean, the Gundam is particularly good for that because there are so many conflicts and fights in general in the series that you can literally pick any point in the timeline and do
1 Year War might as well be like two anime basically like the fictional equivalent of like the Sengoku period or World War II. Like it's basically like a tapestry for just like the most like complex, wide-reaching, like tumultuous period of war possible.
Yeah. I think someone described it as the Romance of the Three Kingdoms meets Vietnam.
Do not pursue Chara as the bell. Yes. Oh, that's perfect.
I mean, makes sense because he betrays everyone that allies with him as well.
Yeah. Also, I just remembered, oh right, there were actual Dynasty Warriors Gundam games. I would not be surprised if they... maybe they did that with him as well in that? I'm not sure. But,
I don't know about the first one, but from the second one onwards, they all tended to be original stories where, like, either they featured dimensions crashing into each other, or everyone kind of lived in the same sort of sphere. So you had, like, the really ridiculous G Gundam stuff going over here. And the relatively gritty Zeta and Double Zeta stuff over here. And Eterna's over there doing who knows what the fuck.
Yeah, much like most Super Robot Wars games, like where they just put like a lot of effort into justifying, all these series are in the same universe.
Yep.
There's Super Alloy Z and also Getter Rays and also Gundanium Alloy. It's all real.
Yep, whatever the hell's going on with Cross Ange and Darling in the Franks, that's happening too.
Don't look too deep into space, though. Don't look at where, like, the space monsters or whatever the fuck they're called from Gunbuster. Just, they're off over there.
Yep, don't go near the Hubble Space Telescope anytime soon. A goddamn irrigator will bite your arm off.
So Unicorn mode, you know, it's basically recreating small snippets of scenes from, like, the OVA. It's effectively limited to the first few episodes, so if you're wanting a game that somehow covers the entirety of what that whole story was, like, that's just not possible. But that's not where the longevity is. The real longevity
by the end of the PS3 lifespan, more or less. So...
Yeah, that's true. Like, it would make more sense if you were trying to, like, cover the entire thing if you made it a PS4 game. But, again, Unicorn mode is not what's important. What's important is custom cast mode. This is where the real... This is the real star of the game right here. Because picture a series of mini-campaigns where you are tasked with completing X amount of missions in a sequential order, one after the other, and you assemble a crew... You know, your own ship, your own, like, people that are on the ship, and, like, your own mobile suits with their pilots fighting for you.
Putting together a team.
Yep. And then you just gotta make it to the end of the route. That's what this is. And it's pretty awesome. Because, like, you take what I had already been describing it when we were dicking around at the tutorial about how complex the controls are and just the amount of depth it offers... You know, there's also a whole lot of mobile suits that you can play as, not just as the Unicorn Gundam itself, for instance. So you can really mix and match and make, like, your dream team of, like, mobile suits that you could swap in between missions at any time and have to make do with the fact that, like, everything's a resource. So, yeah, you better hope that you don't get fucking destroyed out there before you reach the end.
42 Zaku 2s and a gun tank. That's what we're going into this war with.
Not quite. You'll see what the menu looks like. So here's what it is. This is obviously, because I had played this game quite a bit, there's a, I basically got, like, the best, like, lineup I could think of for the moment, because, you can essentially assign 6 mobile suits. 3, the ones that are on the right are what you place in reserve, while the 3 on the left are your playable suit and your 2 wingmen. You can attach, like, your weapon of choice to them if the suit allows for it. You can assign emblems, which admittedly I've not done because there's a lot of things you can spend points on as far as, like, unlocks, and I've not gotten anywhere close to unlocking that shit. But then in the middle, as you can,
a vanity thing. Then I take it, not actually a stat booster.
Yeah, it's just aesthetic. The real stat boosters come from the people you assign, because you have not only, your pilots, which have their own innate pilot skills and abilities. Yeah, but then you also have, like, your ship, which is where you house all your suits, and, like, depending on how good the ship is and upgraded and whatnot, that'll affect your ability to essentially replenish yourself in between missions. And so you can give, like, your captain, as well as, like, other supporting crew that also have, like, their own stat buffs that can come into play. So, like, when you start out, you're obviously very limited. In fact, the numbers you see on the right, the 324 over 500, like, that's basically, like, the max level. Like all of these suits and weapons and whatnot, pilots, etc., they all have a cost. And the idea is that you need to keep their total cost level under the allowed cost as based on the suit that is essentially escorting them through these campaigns. So if you start with, like, a really small beginner one, or one that's just, like, not upgraded at all, that point level is going to be very low. But so I got 500.
You can increase the stat cap essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's why I've basically been perfectly fine with all 6 of these that I got right now, It works well for me. So let's get into a couple of these custom cast scenarios, because the other thing that's really cool about it, and as you can see, you could always swap out. There's backup 1, 2, and 3. So naturally, like, if you're taking a lot of damage, it's a good thing to have plenty of backups that you can switch to and are familiar with.
But backups need to be unique, or can you just, like, field 3 of the same mech, for example?
I think it allows for variations of the same unit if possible, but no. Oh wait, no, I just remembered. There are also actually some units that are, like, kind of like the jobber tier level of mecha that are, like, mass-produced, non-unique, where you can actually, if you go to, like, the laboratory menu setting, which is where you buy and develop new mobile suits and other stuff, you can actually obtain up to 6 of those. But the unique stuff, like the Unicorn Gundam, or Castria, I think it's called, like this Zaku colored Quibbly, and then the Shinaju, which is piloted by our Char lookalike. Those are one of a kind. You cannot have multiple of those. Right. Like, even if they have, like, variations of them, like different loadouts, you cannot have, like, 2 variations at once. So we'll get into a couple of these and show that, like, not only are you playing through these sections, like, one mission after the other, almost like, it's all length perfectly, that it's almost like a mini arcade game. And because of that, there's a little bit of outrun in here, where you get branching paths. And I think as you saw during, like, as I was scrolling through, like, the options, like Custom Cast Mode 5 specifically has the most branching paths, that it looks like an outrun map.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, at first I thought those were your completion ranks, and then I noticed it, like, when we saw that one, it went all the way down to, like, D or E, I think it was.
Yes.
I was like, you can't be that bad at the game, can you?
No, the ranks are that way because how you go down your different mission routes is you have to perform well in the given mission. Like, there are like certain sub-objectives that are custom designed for those specific encounters, and if you meet them, then you get to go to like the better mission, which is 1 tier up. If you miss it, you go 1 tier down, and that's how it works. It's a interesting way that like I appreciate, because it makes sense for this. Like, this is a game where I think it makes sense to put a bit of pressure on players to do really well, as opposed to Outrun, where, you know, you look at those games on the outset is a lot more about just the chill vibes and the joy of just joyriding. You know, so it makes sense in Outrun that you have full control over which route you go, because there's little pressure.
Yeah. Also, the Darius games do a route branching system as well, except it's more you choose to go that path. Like in Outrun.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You think of Outrun, I think of Darius. We are not the same.
Yeah. So yeah, you can see it right there as well. Like, there's like, you know, like in the top right, you can see things like mission time, like how much time you have to work with. There's like mission achievements, which in this case is just like destroying enough enemies before X amount of time has passed, or reinforcements, etc. And you can see as well all those different like stat boosts like popping up randomly from like all the different pilot skills and like character buffs like just kicking in one after the other. So yeah,
imagine this being incredibly overwhelming the first time you play it.
Kinda, but at the same time, like when you start custom cast mode for the first time, you're not gonna have access to like half of the shit that I'm demonstrating here. Like, you're dealing with a lot more limited resources to work with. You like more like you basically won't have the option to get like a full six mobile suit squad. You know, at best you might only have like 1 or 2. So you gotta just focus on, you know, building up the resources so that you can get better mobile suits. And if you do that, then that'll give you better chance of getting like of clearing the higher ranked routes on later custom cast mission routes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and considering that this is the first one of these, it's like these dudes are going down so fast.
Yeah. I take it the mission achievement is you need to get a minimum of wherever the bar is in order to complete that part of the mission.
Yes. And I think like the ideal thing obviously is to make sure that it's not just at the bare minimum, but that you fill it up all the way.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just good practice to do so. But yeah, there's the Kshatriya, which is a Unicorn unit, piloted by Char. What? So this is something where it adds like just that extra little bit of randomness and variety to the missions, even though the objectives you're doing are still locked in place as what they are. The special boss units or whatever that you fight are all you know, there's a randomization to them as far as the pilots go. Like, I believe the mobile suits themselves are set in stone, but, you know, who pilots them can change. So you get those opportunities for different dialogue, for enemy chatter, and that's increased significantly more. So it's a Char class, basically. Yeah. Like if it's the more elite type of pilot, then they'll naturally like kind of like fill in for the role of like those more elite type of mobile suits. But yeah, like that randomness is increased even more when you factor in the DLC, because the DLC is not just new missions for Unicorn mode, it's also new mobile suits, it's new pilots, it's new everything. They put out a lot of stuff for this.
I take it whoever the pilot is obviously going to affect the stats of the suit that you're fighting, so.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, you can see right here, because I met the mission achievement requirement, I get to go to the S rank route instead of A. Yeah, and like I believe you can't do the Star Fox 64 thing where it's like even if you qualify for the harder routes, you can still switch down to the lower one in between.
I guess that's also a bit difficult if you're deliberately aiming for the ranks.
Yeah, a little, but Well, I mean, I guess, like, more often than not, if you're just playing through this game naturally and not how I'm doing it, where I have everything completed, you're more than likely going to hit the lower ranked routes anyway, because you're still having to go through the sort of grind that is just inherent to this game, you know, which is an unfortunate thing. Like, I still only have a fraction of the content unlocked for this game as far as, like, playable suits and pilots and whatnot, because, as well as upgrading them to max, because everything costs so damn much compared to your point acquisition.
One of those kind of games.
Yeah, it's the Art Dink effect.
Yep.
Although unlike Art Dink, there really isn't any, like, post-game material that is, like, quite as ball-busting as what typically shows up in, like, some of Art Dink's offerings. So that's at least the saving grace, because at least with custom cast mode, for as little scenarios as there are in it, it's a fortunate thing that, like, it doesn't take an insane amount of effort to get a really good group of mobile suits and, like, pilots and a crew on your ship. That, like, once you do that, like, getting all, like, the S tier ranks on all of the different routes is like a cakewalk. It just comes naturally from playing. So we also got battleships, something that I also forgot to mention a really unique thing about as far as fighting it. You know, when you pilot the battleship itself, it'll always lock on to where the bridge is. You know, that's the weak point. But there's a whole bunch of turrets on there, so what if you want to deal with that? Well, you just tap left or right on the D-pad, and it will switch to a different lock-on system where it will target the turrets on the ship itself.
Maybe it's because I played so much R-Type when I was younger, but I always loved stripping any kind of battleships of their defenses before I finish it off.
Yeah, it's a pretty satisfying feeling, you know? I mean, like, especially for R-Type, like, that's a serious tradition. You would be, like, crucified if you made an R-Type game and you didn't have a battleship level.
Oh, you gotta have the battleship at Brave. Non-negotiable.
100%. But, and an important thing to note as well with that D-pad lock-on method is that not only does it work for targeting the turrets, and my pilot and my co-pilot, my wingmen are so good at their jobs that they basically took care of the ship for me. But the D-pad lock-on is also how you can target the specific supply pickups. So if you need to specifically find those, but you don't want to go through the hassle of, like, I'm trying to find where the supply is, but my lock-on keeps focusing on the enemies, well, there's your alternate way of doing it.
That's pretty cool.
They gave a lot of thought to trying to make this as, like, hassle-free of a control scheme, considering they managed to cram, like, twice the functionality on the majority of inputs. All because of the L1 button. Like, that's the beauty of it. Amuro? That's not the new Gundam.
Why purple? Actually, no, it's more lavender, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But still pretty angular, just like a lot of 2000s era Gundam's suits, as you would expect.
Yeah.
It's the Regal. Or Stark Jagan, I forgot. Yeah, he's thinking of a different one. Also, Jagan just makes me laugh because it just like, every time I hear it, like, I think about the about just, like, Geese Howard and like, just one of his moves. It just, like, it sounds similar to that, where he just shouts Jagan and like his usual Geese Howard voice.
I always wind up thinking of Fire Emblem because I granted I'm not a huge Fire Emblem fan, but it's one of those things you pick up by, you know, being in those kind of circles. Where the first Fire Emblem game had a character who was incredibly overpowered and could wipe out entire maps by himself at the beginning. But that would mean that he would be sucking up experience for weaker classes. So if you relied on him, then you would just get completely fucked over once you got past a certain point. So the series has, like, a tradition of having a class like that, because the series likes its traditions.
Yeah.
And people will always debate over who the Jagan of this game is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and
Also, this
no
Naruto has
vortex.
looks like it's got oddly muscular shoulders there.
Yeah. It's, I mean, like, you can look at these designs and be like, you clearly see where they looked at specific units from Char's counterattack and went, what's the next logical step? Including, like, updating things like Null Vortex pointing out, like, one of the units that's, like, part of Unicorn, which is the Delta Gundam Kai, which is, like, an upgraded, like, a Gundam version of a mobile suit known as the Delta Plus. Which those have, like, a very interesting feature as well, to add even more to, like, the insane mechanical depth and complexity this game has. But, I believe it is, like, the Delta Plus, or, like, and, like, just that general line of mobile suits in this game is that, you know, much like the Zeta Gundam, they have a transformation mode where they go into, like, a flight form. But, what's really cool about it is that when you have it active in the field on your team, you hold L1 and then press L3, and it will, like, highlight a function that's on your HUD that says open channel, and it basically sends a signal to it that says, hey, I want to dock with you. Transform so I can ride on you. And then it's like, it's basically a sub-flight mode. So, like, when you have, like, the transforming units, you can transform, and it does change the control method into a rudimentary kind of flight-based model. Where you actually can go upside down and all that stuff, you know, like you would expect with, like, a plane or a spaceship. But now you also have, like, a variation of that where you have, like, a mobile suit, like, hanging off of the back of it. And it has, like, its own weapons and maneuverability mechanics and everything. Like they did their homework on, like, all the details they needed to get right about, like, mobile suit combat in space. In fact, I would dare say, thinking about it, when it comes to, like, that aspect, I think this is the best example of space-focused mobile suit Gundam combat.
Yeah.
But I specify space combat because I think about it every now and then, considering that, you know, this is based on Another Century's Episode's gameplay. Those games have both, missions that take place in an atmosphere and outside of an atmosphere. So it's like, theoretically, could this also work for, like, a ground-based Gundam game? And thinking about all the games I played on this stream up to this point, some of which you've seen, I genuinely think that it would feel almost like it's like a mismatch for that if you tried to take this gameplay system and put it inside, like, a place that has gravity.
Yeah, but the entire system focus of this game is 360 degrees of movement. So if you're taking away, like, an entire plane of movement, then naturally, like, you're gonna have to rebalance absolutely everything in order to make it work. And then, you know, you're kind of losing what makes the game stand out in a way. So,
yeah, especially Plus, there's also the. Oh, sorry, but you continue.
I was going to say, you would essentially be losing what makes this game special compared to others, and like that's just a mistake when you get down to it, really.
Mm-hmm. That, and as well as, you know, admittedly, I can't say for sure, nor you, because we've not watched a Unicorn. But considering all the visuals we've seen of that anime, like. No Vortex. I assume you know maybe a bit because you recognize Gundam Unicorn. Maybe you could explain, but are there any actual, like, Gundam combat or just mobile suit combat scenarios in that OVA series that take place in an atmosphere? Like, either on a planet or inside of a colony or anything that has gravity? Because when I think about Unicorn and the visuals associated with it, it is always so closely, like, matched with, like, the visuals of space in my eyes.
I'm sure that I've seen screen caps or sequences that do take place in what looks like a colony. But don't hold me to that because
yeah.
Really,
That said, though, that's it though, Noel. Like to answer your question about the maneuverability of transforming mobile suits is like it's a wide turning radius, but it does handle a bit differently than how it does in Ace 2 and 3, mainly in the sense that it has a very handy feature that I wish those PS2 games actually had, where if you press X, like the button you normally use to activate your boost, and you're locked on, it will automatically reorient your facing position. Like it will like go through like its turning radius to by whatever the shortest means possible to face your target and go in their direction. Because when you were in a flight mode for certain units in Ace 2 or 3, you couldn't do that. Like, if you flew past them, tough shit. You basically had to transform back into robot mode just so you could see where they are. So, it's made a bit more viable here, but it's also noticeably, not as, like, fast-paced or intricate as something like an Ace Combat, for instance. But it's an appreciated improvement on those factors. Oh, plenty. Like, they even include lots of old suits from 1 Year War to Char's counterattack. Okay, so... Alright, so, like, yeah, I guess Unicorn, as it is, as a whole, isn't entirely space battles. It's just, this was very much the game that focused, I guess, a lot on it, because that's where a lot of the distinctive scenes were the ones that took place in. That makes sense.
And also, if this is basically the successor to Another Century, then they probably were like, well, we've already got the groundwork laid. We'd be fools for not leaning into it as hard as we could.
Yeah. In fact, actually, let's get the Delta Plus up here. We'll mess around with like the Regal a bit later, and like some of these other, especially like that pink colored Gira looking one. That's at the bottom. I keep holding in reserve. We'll get to show him eventually. This is mission. This is like the 5th custom cast route that you could take. The one that is the most complex because it ends in 4 different spots depending on how well you do in all of these missions.
For ending scenarios essentially.
Yeah. Funny enough as well, like we mentioned how much this is like a successor to the gameplay of Another Century's episode, but even if you look at it in the context of other Gundam games that try to portray space combat, there is actually one space-focused Gundam game besides this that I can think of, and it's for the PS2 called Encounters in Space. It's kind of in a similar situation like this, where half of it is recreations of a specific aspect of an existing anime, which is it just recreates the latter part of original Mobile Suit Gundam, where White Base departs from Jaburo and returns to space. But it also has its own bonus campaign, which is like an original side story and is therefore, like the better content, because it's not trying to shoehorn itself into the specific pacing and scenarios and scripting of the anime. But and that tries to do a similar thing as well, where it is like, yeah, when you're in space, it has some missions that are like kind of rail shootery, like moving the character around the screen like it's a space harrier or something. But then you have stuff where it is like you have full control, including vertical up and down movement on separate buttons. But obviously this game, in terms of just functionality, game feel, and complexity, it just blows that clear out of the water. Yeah, honestly, let's just skip that since I got my little speech out of the way.
The intros are really long in this game.
Really long, especially when you consider that these are all, being dynamically generated, essentially, because they have to account for the fact that every pilot has to kind of chime in specific ways to make the conversation natural.
Yeah, 5 trillion different bits of dialogue that can potentially happen.
Very much so. Yeah, there's the Kshatriya. But I believe I'm pronouncing it right. It's a very Russian-sounding name.
Yeah, it sounds like a bastardization or a mispronunciation of a Katusha, which was, if I remember correctly, it was like a sort of like a precursor to the disposable RPG launcher.
Yeah, I guess that would be not surprising that that a Xeon suit would kind of adopt that mentality, considering that that like stuff like the Zakus or the Giras have literally used Sturmfausts.
Yeah, there's quite a few models that have the old Picklehau patent gas mask combo.
Yeah, especially with just like, like I think it's especially with the Giras in particular. Like when you look at like those being like the updates to like what the kind of the Zaku design, as it were, they just look so much more like they just came out of Jinro.
Yeah, the Zabis were a bit problematic with the parts of World War II they liked, weren't they?
Yeah. Don't pay attention to the what the Xeon flag looks like.
Oh God, no.
Yeah.
I remember there was a story years ago of someone going to an anime convention, mostly apocryphal, but I can firmly believe it. Someone going to an anime convention dressed as a Xeon soldier, and they brought the Xeonic flag with them. And
Oh
they got
no!
Because they thought that
it was they thought he was being a Nazi. Oh
yeah.
No! Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm on the one hand, I'm like, that poor bastard, but on the other hand, it's like, the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah, it's real silly. Like media literacy. How do you not have it?
In fairness, this was like mid 2000s, and like granted, Gundam is still an incredibly niche series in the greater scheme of pop culture of the West. So yeah. I can't really blame the cops or whoever called them for thinking that.
Yeah.
But the guy should have known better.
Very much so, yeah. Char's back, but before we can fight him, we gotta make sure that all these Irish-class warships are taken out, because that's part of our mission achievement. We cannot let any of these pass. Shit. Oh yeah, it's going down. That's good. Okay. Oh, and there's still the one more right over there. I will say, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to point out as well. Like, not only is Char's back, but he's piloting the Sinaju Stein. I at least recognize that from, like, mostly from what I can gather from like the context of only this game and just piecing together like the visuals in like the Unicorn story mode, is that there is a mission you play where you essentially play as Full Frontal, who is like hijacked that particular model, and that's, I think, my guess is that that's what is used to basically turn into the actual like crimson red colored Sinaju that he is known for, because it looks very bare like a prototype.
Yeah. Yeah, once they start getting into the upgraded forms and side grades of the various mechs in the Gundam universe, I'm just like, I don't know what's going on anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool that you can see at least like that it's consistent enough that you can see where like the clear technological lineage is. It helps like it helps establish things like like the believability of the world. It's part of what I like about Macross, because it's a very linear series in terms of time. That means you can always count on the next Valkyrie design they come up with to have like more advanced munitions or like more streamlined transformation mechanics.
Yeah, being more of an iteration on the previous series.
Yep. So there we go. Actually, forget if where this is going to take us, but otherwise you can see there's like quite a bit of damage taken. Fortunately, like our ship is pretty good at restoring most of like the things like our like AP and fuel and whatnot, but alas, we did not get the mission achievement meter all the way emptied despite my best efforts. So we're going down to one of the lower ranks, but that's all right. We'll just keep going until we reach the end and switch it over to do that. Play as the Delta Plus. And you know what? Yeah, let's get... yeah, we'll get this gear out here. Yeah, the people that normally stay in the backup lane are now getting their time to shine.
Everyone gets their day in the sun, which in space is everywhere.
Yeah. Yay, cosmic radiation!
Woo! Well, it worked out. The Fantastic Four came out okay. 3 of them did.
One of them came out well enough that he's now the ruler of his own country. Took over the world twice and gave it up because he got bored. Or is it more than twice at this point? I have no idea what the state of fucking, like, Fantastic Four comics are and what plots they've delved into.
See, I've always been more of an X-Men fan. So
fair.
Stuff like
that is the better option.
So stuff like the Avengers and Fantastic Four in general, I've always been kind of, yeah, they are a thing. Sometimes I interact with the characters I like, but they've always been more of a blind spot for me.
Yeah. So here we are, playing as the Delta Plus, and if you look over at like our HUD in the bottom left with the radar and all our meters, you see what I was talking about. There's that flashing icon, open channel. Let's open the channel. If they could get to me in time. I don't know, this might be bad. Seriously, where the hell? Yeah. Hold on, I'm actually going to... Yeah, like, let's actually just disable the lock-on first and dash forward, because there's, like, a target up ahead that we really need to take out as part of this mission. And it's hanging all the way at the end of this.
They do not make it easy for you.
Nope. And yeah, even on a surface like this, you just like glide over it. There's like no walking animation for attaching to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting that they don't have like an actual run.
Yeah,
I imagine it would probably be quicker.
Yeah, especially because the Ace games actually have that on some of the units. You play another Centuries Episode 3 and you're like playing as the Get a Robo team. It's like they have actual, you know, ground movement animations. You run, you boost run as Shin Getter 2, and you can literally feel the vibrations of each step in the controller. It's pretty great. But no, let's take care of this Kshatriya. This looks like the original Delta Gundam, Delta Plus colors, like the dark gray, dark navy blue. Oh, I guess so, yeah, because I do remember from like all like the different units that you have access to, I believe there is a Delta Plus that is more of that traditional color. I just went with this one because I'm like, yeah, this looks like the Hyakshiki. That's familiar enough. Which, unfortunately, I should add, like, that one is not in this game as DLC. There are units from Char's Counterattack that were made downloadable content. Unsurprisingly, it was the Sazabi and the new Gundam. Because why wouldn't you have those?
Again, contractual obligations are kind of a pain in the ass, but, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, but that's also the kind of contractual obligation that I would think people would be all for, because who doesn't love those fucking suits? especially new Gundam. Like I am always just forever in love with like the armaments that thing has and how it works as just like the overall silhouette and design that it has. Yeah,
in terms of profile, it definitely has one of the more instantly recognizable ones.
Yeah, the one wing made out of funnels really helps it.
Yeah,
and that was before a time before Sephiroth had the whole fucking one wing angel wing motif that fucking like teenage weeb edgelords thought was the coolest shit ever.
Plus, I can't think of the new Gundam without thinking of all the kit bashes that people have done, where they just keep adding more and more funnels to it till it turns into a hellish spiral.
Yeah, I mean, High New Gundam's technically that, I believe, or it just straight up is like, oh yeah, we added the second wing made of funnels.
Yeah.
That's good.
We thought there were enough funnels. We were wrong. We apologize for that sincerely.
More funnels! Just say it like Tim Allen. More power! drops a colony on Australia. Drops a colony on Australia. Oh, I guess it's off to jail for me.
Look, the pilot can still think straight. Add more funnels.
Yeah. Look at that. Everything's restored. That's how fucking good our ship is.
Yeah, everyone took kind of a pasting in that fight as well.
Still not good enough to go to a higher tier, but whatever. I admittedly, like, I forgot what the specific criteria is. You know, I'm not using my phone to Google Translate these as it goes on. That's just how it is. I'm gonna swap these because any mobile suit can technically dock with the Regal when you use the open channel command. So hopefully this will be like a better spot to use it, because I do want to at least show off. Like alternatively, I could just play as the Regal and like use like its actual flight transformation, but I just think visually it is so much cooler than this. Plus, I already demonstrated enough that flight mode existed in Another Centuries episode. So I think it's better to give people an idea of like what the subflight variation is like in something where it's an actual part of the universe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and there was also one thing I forgot to mention about like that last environment we were in, you know, with like that long central horizontal pillar. And how how we noted that there was no real walking or running animation when you land on it. There's a tutorial for a specific unit type. I believe it's called the Roid, or whatever it is. I think No Vortex would know, like if he can clarify for me. But it's another one of those type of like transforming mobile suits. But instead of turning into like a flight model, it turns basically into like a land vehicle. And it has an actual, control mechanism that's like the inputs mostly overlap with how it does in for units with flight mode, but obviously it's bound to the surface that it lands on. But you only ever get to really see how that works when you're in that tutorial mission. There is no mission in Unicorn mode. Even in that environment, I feel like I tested it before, where I tried to bring like the rod in there and use its transformation on that surface, and I don't think it was like either it doesn't work or it does, and the way I was doing it was just so jank that it didn't work how I thought it was supposed to. Because the tutorial that teaches you that there's that land vehicle transformation is in an environment that does not appear anywhere else. Like it's a full-on like large interior space with and such. So I have no idea what is up with that, why they thought to include that when there just wasn't any content to properly utilize it. Maybe they had plans to possibly include stuff like that in DLC, but they were probably assuming that the DLC plans for this game... Oh, you mean the D50C Lotto? Okay, I guess that makes sense. Again, Elzenar's like trying to like decipher what something means, like when it's in katakana, like what that directly translates to could be a bit difficult. Yeah, I think the Lotto might be what I'm thinking of. But yeah, it just has its own training environment, its own training mission that does not apply to any of the other missions that you engage with, because the game knows it's all about space combat. And if there were any post-release plans they had in mind for possibly including land-focused combat, those clearly fell through because the DLC timeline was like... It clearly would have needed to go for a lot longer than it ended up for this game, actually.
Kind of unusual for any kind of mech in Gundam to transform into a land vehicle as well anyway. Like, yeah. If there's any transformation, it's usually either a super mode or it just transforms into a straight-up jet.
Anyway, here's what I was talking about, subflight mode. Yeah, as you can see... Yeah, and as you can see, when you press left or right on the stick, it doesn't turn to the left or right. It, in the traditional sense, it banks left or right. So you could actually do like something kind of resembling flight maneuvers, but turn radius is super huge. R2 lets you boost, L2 brakes. You can you're limited to only one weapon, but you can change the type to either like a... Oh, I accidentally dismantled, because L3 is how you dismantle it, or like disembark from it. But come on, damn it!
Ace Combat Century episode.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Delta Plus came in to assist. Look at that. Now my right is gold. Look how swag it is.
Yeah, no,
but you can also
that
see
looks more like a straight up piggyback ride.
Yeah, it does. But you can see what I'm talking about, where like I mentioned that if you press the X button that you normally use to engage your boosters, you will reorient your facing direction to the target. Something that, you know, the Ace games on PS2 absolutely needed in order for the flight modes to feel more viable than they were. But with your, but like when you're piggybacked like this, your ranged weapons are limited to only one type, and it does change depending on the unit you are piggybacking on. Like you got this like grenade launcher that is specifically part of like this Delta Plus model, but the Regal had just like a regular beam machine cannon, I think it was. But then you can the alternate fire you can use is basically your whatever your default primary fire is when you're not docked in. So that's how it is. Anyway, that's enough messing around with it. I just wanted to show it out because I mean, like, what other games like have that attention to detail?
Yeah. Now I was gonna say I don't know why, but the idea of a grenade launcher in space seems like kind of a liability. It just seems like a really bad idea.
Remember, not just grenade launchers that are mecha-sized.
Yeah.
like we're dealing with like significantly bigger like caliber ranges. Let us never forget the Hilferders. Oh, and I didn't get the mission completion like meter filled all the way up, so that technically counts as a game over. Whoops. Well, I mean, I was spending more time trying to explain and demonstrate things, as it were.
Spent too much time dicking around getting piggyback rides.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty fun, not gonna lie. You still get some points for completing it, though, at least. In fact, I will say that it is tedious because it's ultimately something that requires you to just do one thing over and over. And that is, if you do scenario 6 just over and over, and you guarantee that you get to the S rank mission end, which is surprisingly easy to get to compared to all these other routes where the mission requirements are more complex. If you just complete those, yeah, like you sorry about that.
I can say, is that your money grinding route?
Yes, because it gets you about 60,000 points on average if you complete it all the way through. But again, that means you have to go through all 4 missions, which are intense, and there's obviously like the load times and in-between sections where you have to choose who you're bringing into the fight. And that just, you know, it takes a bit of time, but it does produce a lot of money, usually enough to get most of the stats, the non-weapon stats for a mobile suit upgraded to max all the way. I just want to, we'll actually go back to Unicorn mode for just one moment because there's this, you can see like I've been swapping through tabs that are actually tied to, you know, the specific years that certain events from Unicorn were supposed to happen. Like events from UC years 92 to 95 are all DLC because like the 96, I guess, is where the OVA technically starts at the very beginning of the plot. But then you have Special, which has nothing to do with the story, and in fact is special versus missions against specific units. So let's fight the new Gundam.
Kind of reminds me of one of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure games. Because at the time, part 8, I believe it was, JoJolion was still running. So rather than having any kind of story mode, because each part had its own individual story mode, they just basically turned it into a series of fights against all the protagonists of the previous series.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, that's kind of how that stuff goes. And also, this is a thing that's like, you know, a clear carryover from Another Century's episode, because it similarly had bonus missions where it was like, fight against the representative of this anime series. You know, so that's kind of like where the idea comes from, and it's just a simple one-on-one duel. Gonna bring in the Unicorn Gundam again this time because you know, for a fight like this, I'll actually have full control and the best scenario for demonstrating its full capabilities, including the Psycom Jack. And it's also decked out so much that, like, look at the shield. It's got twin beam Gatling guns attached to it.
Yeah, technically that's a whole, you know, a whole time period before the, which one was it in Wing Gundam that had those?
Oh, heavy arms.
Yeah, I thought it was the heavy arms, but I didn't want to say.
Yeah. So I will say, when I did these missions for the first time, the one against New Gundam Agency was, like, genuinely, like, amazing to do just because I think it's one of those things where, kind of getting back to the joke about contractual obligations and how, like, even if it is an obligation, it still feels cool to have it all the same. And that is, if there is a mission in a Gundam game, bonus or otherwise, where you have to fight Amuro, it had better be a goddamn fight for your life. Because this is the original. And it's like, he's got all of his kits from Char's counterattack. Those fin funnels will, like, just pepper you and, like, interrupt your combo strings. He'll dodge out of, like, most of your attempts to melee him. You have to make sure that your shots are lined up and true as best as you can. Because, oh boy. Yeah, he does not go easy on you.
I mean, fundamentally, it is easy to forget that and think, yeah, Amuro Ray, the guy's kind of a joke. Just because of all the stuff that's come since. But, you know, he was kind of the prototype for the, you know, the battle-hardened, battle-weary protagonist in a mech series.
And maybe argue, well, I mean, barring whether or not you think that applies more to Camille, possibly like the first, like, genuine example of representation for neurodivergent protagonists.
Mm.
Because we've made this observation before, like, new types might as well. Oh yeah, and that's his eye field that he's doing right now. I think it's his eye field equivalent. You know, the little pyramid formation with the with the funnels that is just blocking all incoming attacks. But yeah, it's just the fact that like his behavior and just how he's, like, responding to, like, just the situation around him is, like, it's clear that it's not mentally mature as, like, everyone else around him. That is, but he's still technically a new type, so it just could be the fact that, you know, people that are obsessed with the idea of the next step of evolution for humanity are probably just confusing autistic people for that.
Yeah.
But, you know, enough messing around, I say. Let's press L3 and R3 at the same time, because that's usually the input you press if you want to go into your super mode when you're serious. There's the money shot again.
Deploy the boy.
Yep. And now, because we're more equipped than we were in that one story mission, look at our melee combos.
Oh, Jesus. Is that a second beam saber coming out of the shield?
Yes, it is.
Oh, boy.
And better yet, hold on. If I could just... Yeah, it's tricky trying to get the Psycom to, like, activate, actually, because it requires things to be active in the environment that can be hijacked, like the fin funnels. And unfortunately, I think I missed my window on that. God damn it. But it's okay. It'll still take us quite a while for this to deplete. I just need to hope that this fucker's eye field goes away and that he launches funnels again so I can really turn the tables. You can actually disengage to your unicorn mode at any time as well. But, oh, here it is. Come on. There it is. It even gets its own cutscene to accompany it.
I believe that is the onomatopoeia for yoink.
Yup. Guess what, bitch? Your funnels are mine. Yeah, see, look at that. I got him locked down. What can you do? And the first time I did it, first time I beat him, I actually landed a pretty great, like a pretty great finish on it, where I did, like, the dash through melee attack. So it also gave me like the fancy camera angle for it, and it felt like I had accomplished something great when I did it.
And getting stun locked by your own weaponry, and that's gonna suck.
Yeah. So as one final bonus, actually, because last night I just recently bought the... well, no, hold on. Before I do so, I might as well demonstrate. There's like the laboratory and tune modes, the settings. Laboratory, again, like I described, that's where you essentially buy new mobile suits, weapons, warships, characters, and emblems. And you can technically sell them, but I kind of choose not to.
Yeah.
You know, I like to have the collection, even if the grind to get everything is so long. It's fine as long as I focus on the things I know I like. But tuning is how you invest your points in advancing like your mobile suit's capabilities. So let's see if I can get... I should be able to... not quite all the way maxed out on fuel efficiency, but close enough. Yeah, you can see, like, there's a lot of points that have to be spent for this, so there's going to be, you can imagine how much you would probably have to play this game if you want absolutely everything purchased and unlocked.
Well,
It's
you
kind
had,
of
what,
nuts.
25, 30,000 points there, and now you've got 2.
Yeah, something like that. And again, like, when I basically earned 60k from completing Scenario 6, it was basically able to get me all of these first 3 upgraded to max and half a fuel. And that was also on top of the fact that, you know, buying this, like, this is the thing that I think is, like, kind of shitty for all the DLC content that this game has. It's, buying the DLC doesn't just give it to you, like, in your arsenal automatically. It's like, the DLC, you buy it for the privilege to buy it in-game from the laboratory.
Double unlock. Gotta love that.
Yeah, because this is how much the new Gundam costs to buy. 77k. They want to make sure you that you're serious about earning that one. So let's recreate Char's counterattack.
See, that kind of thing always pissed me off more than anything, because they always say, oh no, you know, we're not ripping bits out of the game in order to sell them to you as DLC. But then you do stuff like that, and it kind of feels like a really, really empty promise.
Yeah, a little bit. The only saving grace, at least from my perspective, is that, again, because of my modded PS3 and the certain steps I took, that was basically no money spent on my part, so whatever. I don't feel nearly as frustrated by it.
The in-app purchases, quote-unquote.
Yeah. One important thing that's, like, that's necessary to note as well is how it's, like, for some mobile suits, as you might see, like this Gira, you know, that I played for a bit of in the custom cast mode. Like, if you see, like, the list of weapons that it has assigned to it, like, a lot of the dashes underneath it are all, like, open weapon slots that it doesn't have. Some of them, like, if the first like line in the list of weapons is a blank, you know, like a set of dashes like that, that means it doesn't have a permanently affixed weapon, which means you get the choice of actual, like, your choice of handheld weapon to equip in it. So you could technically go, like, play as the new Gundam, but not using the specific weapons all the way that Amuro used with it. You could, like, equip, like, dual chain guns on the right arm if you wanted.
Seems a mite excessive.
Yeah, or the beam magnum, obviously, which is like quite a powerful fucking thing. In fact, let's do that. I mean, I know it's been demonstrated a bit already with, like, the Unicorn Gundam, but the whole idea behind that, you know, Magnum's in the title, which means it packs quite a heavy punch, but it does have a bit of a lengthy startup time before the projectile fires. But when it goes off, it's like a powerful fucking railgun. Anyway, we may not have Axis in the background, but we might as well pretend that we are trying to stop the Earth from suffering a nuclear winter at the hand of a colony drop. Oh, and his And the Sazabi's little like bits, fin funnels, are also just as aggravating to deal with. Like they're so prone to like interrupting a lot of your actions.
Yeah.
And that was a good shot.
Yeah, I like the little electromagnetic crackles around it. It makes it look more like a railgun.
Yeah. I imagine that's a lot of like what the intent behind it was. They just call it a Magnum because from the perspective of the mecha size, it would be like a Magnum. It's just a hand cannon. It's really powerful.
I mean, the barrel's the size of pretty much the head to the torso of the mech itself. Yeah. That's not understated.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
And he's also just really good at like kind of like deflecting a lot of my attempts at a melee combo from the front, because like you do have defensive. Yeah, you do have defensive mechanics in place, which are fine. We'll get your Dark Souls comparisons out of the way. It's like that. You press the button to guard when their attack strikes, so that you can parry it. There's no riposte animation, thankfully, that takes off an absurd amount of damage, thus making the rest of your kits completely useless.
Yeah, meaning whoever manages to parry or backstab first wins.
Yeah, this fortunately is not like that. This is a proper-ass mecha game.
Admittedly, I'm seeing some kind of mech-based Dark Souls game where you just, rather than having equipment, you just swap parts in and out would be my absolute dream.
Yep. And I do love as well, with the Hyper Bazooka, you fire it the way that you expect him to, where he just does a backflip.
That was to reduce the recoil, wasn't it?
That makes sense, yeah. Again, I've not watched Char's counterattack, but considering how much of an ace pilot Amuro is supposed to be by this point, I would not be surprised if that's the conclusion he came to. That said, though, because of the different firing modes, if you go with like the low version for like the Hyper Bazooka, he does fire in normally. It's just the high version is so much cooler every time.
Yeah. I don't know if it's ever stated in the film because I've never seen it myself, but I've seen it posited that that's the reason why he has to do the backflip every time he fires it.
Yeah. The only thing I feel is missing, I want to say the new Gundam had access to it, but there's none of like those dummy balloons that you can deploy. Because the new Gundam in Another Century's episode, whenever it's been featured, has had that function as well. But, I mean, they were limited to only the face buttons when it came to cramming in all those extra sub-weapons, so I can understand if they had to sacrifice one thing, that was probably the right call.
Yeah. Now, you can't do everything. There has to be limitations, so if that's what they did, then it only makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. Have a haro.
I'd rather not. Those eyes creep me out, that zombie haro there. Like
but yeah, but that's a nice, funny thing with this, is that, like, as far as, like, all the features this game has, that even lets you customize, like, your title screen menu. Which probably wasn't that difficult to implement, naturally, because that's just the BGM.
Yeah. I'll admit I'm a sucker for any kind of game that lets you change the themes or the backgrounds for all the various menus.
Mm-hmm. Arc like Genki? Yeah, I guess so. This game definitely makes me feel that emotion. But yeah, this was Gundam Unicorn for the PS3. It does make me a little bit misty-eyed internally, just knowing that this was like the last time From Software like engaged with this particular like combat system for a mecha game. Like, I feel like there's a lot of games out there that I felt definitely were aware of Zone of the Ender's existence and what it was trying to do with taking the concept of a virtual on style mecha game, but allowing you to freely float in the air. Like, that's a very appealing concept that harkens very close to this to the kind of mecha anime fantasy that people often think about when it comes to these sort of like crazy, over-the-top, high-speed robot battles. And everyone's tried it in all sorts of different ways. FromSoft, I'd say, was still the most successful of it, with ArtThink being a very close second with their PSP games, being very good demonstrations of how they understood the fundamentals, but also because they were developing those for PSP, they also had a leg up on other developers by knowing how to make a game for a handheld that's a 3D gameplay, but works with less controls than what you have on a home console gamepad.
Mm-hmm.
And I still miss this gameplay system a lot. I'll still boot up Ace 3 every now and then. I feel like I should also boot this up more than I do. But I think the reason why I don't is because naturally this is a Gundam-focused version of that concept. With Ace 3, I had the benefit of, it's not just Gundam, it's also Nadeshiko, Getter Robo, Eureka 7. All kinds of other franchises that I recognize and have enjoyed in the past, that it's I wanna play as the Nirvash and do air surfing. That's cool.
I need to rewatch Nadesco. Picked it up on Blu-ray ages ago, but I haven't gotten around to rewatching it. And it's a really fun series.
Yeah, I definitely need to rewatch it as well. I think I said as much when I was talking with Neff about it, during the Ace streams, and how all three of those games feature Nadeshiko, and how it's the sort of weirdly frustrating part is that only Ace 2 is the one that actively pulls from the TV anime, which is the one that everyone remembers and likes most, because Ace 1 and 3 focus way more on plot elements from the Prince of Darkness, which is less fun. It's just a less fun scenario and kind of boring to watch compared to the sort of subversive irreverence of almost meta nature of Nadeshiko, where it's just this is a universe where not only war is fought with giant robots and shit, but also super robot anime exists, and people are fans of it in that same universe. And sometimes people are foolish enough to not know the difference between the two.
Also, Super Robot anime is a cultural phenomenon on a par with the songs of Lin Min-mei.
Yeah, to the point where it's the Jovians might as well be described as, what if the Principality of Zeon based all of their ideals on, instead of just being space Nazis, and instead deciding to completely misinterpret the concept of justice as shown in Super Robot anime, and thinking that it's all totally within the realm of whoever wields it. If you think you're the protagonist, then yeah, of course you're in the right.
What if Giren Zabe was a gigantic weeb?
Oh god. What if Giren Zabe decreed that that the beauty standard for all citizens of Zeon was to be the heroine girlfriend of a super robot show? I can't believe you fell for that Earth woman. Yeah, but it's just I don't see how you could fall for her and not this perfect example of womanhood. I know you mean well, but what? She's a cartoon woman, you idiot! Screen crack.
First and foremost, it means that the life expectancy for women in that world is going to be a hell of a lot lower.
Oh yeah. But they're all 16. Yeah, that's actually the real problem. Oh my god. Oh yeah, and just that bit that I recited, that's all the more reason why I think I don't need to convince you as much about it, because we're kind of both fans of ADV's old dubs to a certain degree. They have a particular charm to it. Naturally, if you ever get around to watching Nadeshiko again, make sure it's the ADV dub, because it's got some fucking gold with with how they translate some of the lines.
Oh no, the Blu-rays, at least the ones that were released over here, have the original dub on them.
Hell yeah!
I quote that so often. Just Akita just going, "Why me? Dear God, why is it always me?"
or just the guy that's yeah, or when they're recruiting all the people to be the crew for the Nadeshiko, and they get the one dude that's doing the weird experiments or whatever in his garage. It's yes, please take me, I'll do anything as long as it means getting away from these two. I'd work in the bowels of hell. Fucking
isn't he
amazing
working in, like,
series.
a robot maid at the time or something?
Yeah, a robot made with a bunch of missiles shoved into its titties and it blows up everywhere.
That's
It's fucking
right, yeah.
stupid.
She's like, I have finished cleaning up the living room now, Master. Boom.
Yes. Yes, watch the Deshko. This isn't just for, me and Kaboom specifically. Everyone watching this as well. If you've not watched Martian Successor in the Deshko, that is absolutely a show to put on your list.
It
You will not be
genuine.
disappointed.
They really don't make shows like that anymore. Like the
Yeah.
tonal shift to drama can be incredibly jarring, but there's a charm to it that's
Yeah.
unmistakable.
Yeah, like dramatic, heavy things happen in that series after moments of like weird, bizarre humor in order to prove a point.
Yeah, episode 3 is the one that everyone. 3 and 4 are the ones that everyone
Yes.
remembers. But there's just so much good stuff, and
Yeah.
the way that that the characters react is remarkably realistic, which arguably makes it even more uncomfortable.
Yeah. Like this is like we mentioned before, like the whole thing is that like this is like it's basically a real robot anime, but it acknowledges the fact that super robot anime exists in universe, and there are people that love it.
Yep.
Where do you toe that line between what's reality and what's just fantasy?
And every so often it needs to remind you that yes, these characters are in a war, and sometimes in war people die.
Yes, very much so.
And then the thing is, as well, is that at the time it's reminding you of that, it's reminding the characters of that as well.
Yep. 100%. Do super robot protagonists watch real robot shows? I feel like they should. I feel like that might need to be a show that actually happens now, where it's just the inverse of the Deshko. where it's just where it's just all the super robot tropes on display in the real world, but like you just see like people getting really engrossed in these like war dramas that are also about giant robots, and just how it's highlighting that maybe it's actually kind of like stressful on our pilots that they have to go out and fight for their lives every day.
Just someone watching and being like, wow, imagine living in a universe where the power of friendship isn't actually a real thing.
Yeah.
We're bastards.
This was fun. Thanks again for being on for this one, Kaboom. This is a good game. It's a shame that it's PS3 only. They couldn't wait a couple years until they could put it on PS4. That way, like, possibly more people could access it. People still have PS4s, presumably, or at least have PS5s, which could play PS4 games.
I mean, at that point, at least more of the story would have been finished.
Through that, yes. I would definitely agree on that. But also at the same time, it probably would not have gotten localized anyway if it just came out 2 years later or something like that. So you'd still be stuck with, I guess if I watch the anime, I know what's going on. But as we demonstrated, we didn't.
Yeah.
We just went through this purely for the appreciation of the gameplay and custom cast mode. Genuinely great. Like there needs to be
the form of love there is.
There needs to be mecha games out there that just take the concept of what custom cast mode is and make it the whole thing. Like, because I feel that overlaps quite nicely, not just with arcade games, but even when you think about, I don't know, stuff in the wake of things like FTL or other kind of like space games where there's like a heavy management side of like trying to keep your crew running and operational after a series of like overwhelming battles. I mean, like post XCOM, even for that matter, even though that's not space opera shit or anything, but it's like, but each mission has consequences that add up. You could make something like that with giant robots. You could see how sick that would be.
I mean, again, as I said with my Dark Souls with giant robots thing, I would absolutely love an XCOM with mechs.
Yes.
Over the last few years, the closest we've gotten to that is 13 Sentinels, and even then, that's kind of like, if you squint a bit, maybe.
Yeah, it's still trading a lot more on the visual novel story presentation end of things than just having a game where the story intervention is light and it's just all about letting these gameplay systems rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But as for next week's game, still on the PS3, thankfully, it'll be still a little bit before we go back to anything on the PSP, at which point, once that's done, we'll be off the PSP forever. But before then, next Wednesday, we'll be going back into the world of Macross with Macross 30, a game based on the subtitle being the number 30, was released for the 30th anniversary of Macross when it came out. And it's a flight RPG? What? It's
That could go one of two ways.
I know which way it goes. And that way is, well, it's not as good as the PSP game, but it's definitely an interesting twist on the formula because ArtThink made it. It's
and that's unexpected to say the least.
Yeah. Millennium Cyborg will be on for that. That'll be a good one, even with all the RPG-ness with heavy dialogue and shit. Well, I'll make sure I have things set up to give as good of a demonstration as possible that I'm fully in control and I'm not just waiting for people to stop talking. In game, by the way, not people on like you or anything like that. But it is what it is.
Talk over everyone, who cares?
Yeah, whatever. It's all well and good, just audio delays and shit. It's just the nature of it. Anyway, look forward to that, everyone. And until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care.
Later.
Game over.